Not too long ago, I made a video talking about the rumored PlayStation 6 handheld. And I was thinking, like, what would I actually want out of a PlayStation 6 handheld? What were some of the features I'd be expecting? What are the many different kinds of games I want to see? What specific kind of things do I expect when it comes to battery life? So I thought, well, in vein of the similar Steam Deck 2 wishlist video I made, let's do one for the PlayStation 6 handheld. Because currently it is only just rumored, but hypothetically, if they were to make one, this would be a collection of the many things that I wish that it would have. Jumping right off the bat, I would love to see the PlayStation 6 handheld have a relatively large screen. Much like the Switch 2, I would hope for it to be at least 8 inches. I think 8 inches is the perfect size for most gaming portable devices. Sometimes the 7 inches found on the Steam Deck in the ROG Ally feels a tad small, and after using the Switch 2 for quite some time, I've actually gotten quite used to that screen size being very comfortable. And seeing devices like the Elite Go also have that same screen size, it's also very nice to have it for larger format games, like when you're playing like first-person shooters. Those are just more comfortable on a large screen that would be on a smaller screen. I would want it to be at least 1080p. I think 1080p is perfectly reasonable, especially if you're playing legacy titles from the PS4 and PS5 generation. I honestly do not think that is a very high bar. Pretty much all games should be able to run at 1080p at this point, and hopefully it would have at least 60 hertz refresh rate, which is fairly standard, but I would want it to at least be like 90 hertz at a minimum, 120 for it to be real nice. But the expectation of any games actually running at 120 hertz would be relatively low, and I think the likelihood of it all might be seeing PS4 games run at 90 hertz and PS5 games run anywhere between 30 and 60 FPS. Something I'm going to carry over from the leak, I want it to be dockable, but not in the same way as it currently is leaked with detachable controllers and everything, basically essentially a Nintendo Switch 2. But I want the controllers to stay affixed. I want it to be dockable in the same way as Steam Deck is dockable. I want you to be able to purchase an external PS5 or PS4 controller, connect it to the device, and use it while it's docked. I think that would make the device feel overall way more complete, because I love detachable controllers, don't get me wrong. They're incredibly convenient for those people who do not want to buy extra controllers, because you break them off, boom, you have 2 controllers. But for the vast majority of titles you'll find yourself playing on a PlayStation device, most likely they're not going to be multiplayer, and you're going to need more buttons than just half of what a controller would provide. So making the controllers in and of themselves detachable isn't necessarily a boon or a downside. So I think I would prefer if they were to stay attached the whole time, just to make the device feel more uniform and more solid in the hands, because the Switch 2, if you're just holding it by the one Joy-Con on the side, feels very bad, and it feels like it's about to snap, which isn't necessarily a huge problem, I guess, but I personally don't like it when my handheld feels like it's bending in my hands. So keeping the controllers affixed with full-size analog sticks would be something that I would be personally much more interested in. And of course, as I mentioned already, it should be able to have access to the full PS4 and PS5 libraries, though I'll be a little bit more understanding than most people. I do not expect PS5 games to run at full resolution and full frame rate as they do on PS5. That would just generally feel a little bit unrealistic, or may cause the device to be more expensive than it realistically should. But I would expect most PS4 games to be able to run at a solid 60 FPS, because the vast majority of those titles can't do so on modern hardware because it's grossly limited by the PS4. They could do something what like Microsoft does with their Xbox One and some Xbox 360 and original Xbox games, the FPS boost technology. But inherently, by running on stronger, newer hardware, some games will just innately run better. Like Bloodborne saw some massive performance issues and frame dips, especially at launch, and just having more power available to it would just make that game generally way more consistent to play in the first place. Much like playing original Switch games on Switch 2, just by virtue of the system being more powerful, most games, even without a Switch 2 update, just run more consistently at a locked whatever previous frame rate it had before. A great example would be like Dark Souls Remastered on Switch. That game kind of ran like butt on the original Switch, at a constantly moving all over the place 30-ish FPS. Now, on Switch 2, it's a locked 30 FPS, and it feels significantly better to play, though wish it was 60. I also wish there would be exclusive games made for the platform. Sony has always done a great job at making some of the best exclusive handheld games or handheld ports of their games, because I don't think this PS5 handheld should just be the void of where PS4 and PS5 games go. I want exclusive, dedicated games made for the platform, because handhelds are the last thing that feel like console gaming. Overall, a handheld can have a much more catered experience than you would on a console, because if you're playing, let's say, Black Ops 6 on your PS5, it feels just like playing Black Ops 6 on your PC, just with a controller. So a console that is handheld would feel way more, I would say, unique, just more of a encompassing gaming experience than it would if you're just playing on your TV. Now, I might lose some of you or gain a ton of your attention with this next one. I would love to see a home console version of the PlayStation 6 handheld. And that might sound initially very confusing, but back during the PS Vita days, Sony did something called the PlayStation TV. It was essentially a PS Vita minus the handheld. It was just a game system that you plug into your TV. You can play all your PS Vita games on your TV, and it was significantly cheaper. And it was essentially a TV set-top box back during the days where the Chromecast was popping off, the Fire Stick just came out, there was that stupid like orb thing. Like, all these things were coming out, and Sony wanted a piece of it. And I'll be honest, I'm kind of surprised it wasn't more successful, because it posed actually pretty decent value for about $100, and usually included a game and a controller. You had access to YouTube, Netflix, and a myriad of other streaming services, compatible with a ton of other games, and you can stream, I think, still from your PS4, PS3 to the Vita. So it was a very early form of like a Fire Stick gaming edition kind of thing. Using a PS4 controller, you still had the touchpad capacity, so you could still play a lot of your favorite games that required a touchpad, and it was just a full gaming experience. Sure, the games looked a little blocky and a little bit low res, but for what it was, it was still significantly better than playing like Android games on your Fire Stick. That was just demonstrably a worse experience. So essentially, I would love them to sell a home console only variant of this PlayStation 6 handheld for about $75 or half the price of the full handheld unit, but keep it designed lower price, just so people who didn't want to spend the $500-700 it might cost for a full fat PlayStation 6 have them have a lower cost option, something that is a more compromised experience, but it is significantly cheaper to make up for it. Some smaller points: I wanted to have Bluetooth, none of this PlayStation Sync bull crap that they're pulling with the PlayStation Portal. I wanted to have a headphone jack, obviously, and full fat analog sticks with full fat triggers and full face buttons. It's fairly common on these little portable handheld gaming devices that they have smaller buttons, and I think that alone makes me incredibly annoyed, because I got big fat thumbs, and playing games on my Switch 2 can hurt after a while, because of, especially if I'm going very hard, I have a little small button dent in my thumb after playing for a bit. But if I'm playing something like a home console, it's perfectly fine because of those glorious bigger, larger buttons. So something like full-sized controls attached to this thing would be significantly better. And I would love to see a large battery, at least 60 watt hours, but ideally somewhere in the 80 range, with an expected battery life playing full, amazing quality games for at least 4 to 5 hours, I think is fairly reasonable. It's important to bear in mind that this handheld is supposedly coming out sometime later in 2027. By that point, the PlayStation 5 would be about 7 years old, and the PS4 being almost roughly around 15-14 years old. I would say it's fairly probable that we can see, at least with a modicum of effort, you can get essentially the entire PS5 and PS4 libraries to work in its full capacity. Alongside that, I would love to see better backwards compatibility with PS3 games, and the full PS2 library, if possible, become available as well, whether that's through an external disc system or just making them available in their PlayStation Store. Also, just a couple different colors, man. When did we only have one color? I would love to see a teal, a blue, a green. I just said the 3 colors in the same variable shade. but it doesn't necessarily matter. Red, white, black, like I want a whole slew of fun colors. Like you could get the PS Vita in. At the end of the day, it was just a fun thought experiment, and I would love to hear what you guys think. What would you want out of a PlayStation 6 handheld? What feature do you draw the line in the sand that this thing has to have? I would love to hear what you guys think about this down below. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe, all of the social media garbage down below, and last but not least, have a wonderful day.